Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a pretty polarizing card game, which isn't a bold statement to make in its current climate. No matter who you ask within the community, the one of two answers you get will always be, they love it, or they hate it. The latter seeming to be the majority opinion nowadays. And it should be no surprise where this animosity comes from. Thinking back to Yu-Gi-Oh's humble beginnings, it was a time where deck building and strategies were nothing more than big number means big good. But just like all things when it comes to the passage of time, change was inevitable. And comparing the state of the game now, it's definitely a drastic change of pace. Thanks to the ever-present hand of powercreep, aka Konami's insatiable hunger for money, it threw the game into a chaotic card pile of 20-minute long combos, unbreakable boards, OTKs out the ass where if a game reaches turn 4, the game's gone on for too long, and a litany of other issues that can be attributed to having both players old and new, questioning whether or not the direction that the game has taken, or is taking, a good one. Keeping that in mind, it can also be argued that it's these issues that got players deciding that the direction taken is a horrible one, and returning to Yu-Gi-Oh's golden years and playing older formats. Popular ones being GOAT and Edison to name a few, where flashy combos and R-turn gameplay aren't the name of the game, unlike the current environment, but exist enough to keep the game fun and interactive. But with the ever-shifting tides of the players' decisions and the changes the game makes and takes, there is one constant that always seems to remain. That being the love someone has for a specific deck. Regardless of how trash it is. Why someone stays attached to a deck well past its prime can range from many things. The art, the playstyle, the theme, or the nostalgia, like with Dark Magician decks. And for me, it was a combination of the previously mentioned why I still use the subject of this video even today. That being, the Gladiator Beasts. A fusion-based gladiatorial theme archetype that despite its lackluster debut, it would eventually become a force to be reckoned with within the competitive scene during its time. It was a deck that got me heavily invested into Yu-Gi-Oh! And one that despite it falling off the face of the earth for both casual and competitive play, outside of older formats, it's still fondly remembered by many within the community. It even still received support throughout the years, but how good was that support? Well... Or at least that was the case until the announcement of the new support. And man, that new support is surprisingly good. It was so good in fact that it turned a battle phase centric strategy into a combo deck that heavily suggests the battle phase. Your archetype either dies with its gimmick, or lives long enough to be another 20-minute long combo deck. But this video isn't exactly about the new support, more so looking at the Gladiator Beast before the support, and how they and their library of cards fare in the modern day. While the answer is pretty obvious, I thought it'd be fun to review all the cards and their flaws as they are now, and by the end, see what the new support fixes and what it doesn't. So by the end of the video, we'll have a deeper understanding of what the new support does to help this age-old classic archetype. Now, without further ado, let's take a step into the Colosseum of the animalistic warriors who refuse to stay down with a guy who refuses to play anything else. Now, before we continue, two things. The first is the grading system I'll be using to rate the viability of each card is broken into 5 parts based on the deck space and the field zones available in-game, namely the graveyard and the banish zone. The grading goes as follows. The main/extra deck is a definite must-use. The side deck is something that can still be considered a must-use or heavily considered, it just depends on variant. The graveyard is something that while other cards nowadays can fill in its role better, it can still be used to fill in for niche situations and strategies without hurting the deck in any major way. The banish zone means it's just bad, and if you do choose to play it, it's at your own discretion. And banish face down, just don't play it. Please. You're better than that. The second thing is taking a look at their unique mechanic that made them stand out from the crowd, as the majority of Gladiator Beasts share this effect. The effect is, at the end of the battle phase, if a Gladiator Beast battled, whether that was through a direct attack or with a monster, and in the monster case it survives that battle, they were able to tag out. This meant that they were able to send themselves back into the deck and special summon a Gladiator Beast monster from the deck except another copy of itself. So to save some time when reading their effects, I will only mention their tagging effects and only bring up the battling aspect if and when it's necessary. Now, while tagging out as a mechanic sounds cool, and it is, being able to summon any Glad from the deck, regardless of level to fit the situation, it also came with some massive downsides that became a lot more blatant later on in Yu-Gi-Oh's lifespan. One of them being that the tag out is for This little cost that, while it still had its counters and problems, were now exacerbated thanks to the popular use of hand traps, with one in particular by the name of Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. Ashing at the right moment in any game can stop a lot of plays, but with most decks nowadays, they can either play through it, or at least set something up on the board. Gladiator Beast? Nah. The current playstyle of Gladiator Beast is pretty fragile and has a big list of choke points within its combo line. Hitting a pivotal point such as the Jagras's tag out is pretty much equal to scooping. But thankfully we aren't alone on that. You are cheating.
You realize that you're proving my point. That you're acting immature, showing that you don't know how to communicate and you can't control your emotions.
Judge! Another problem is all main deck Glads do nothing on their own and have to be special summoned by the effect of another Glad to go off. What this means is that all Glads in your hand are Garnets, and on the field, vanilla monsters. And in the current state of Yu-Gi-Oh, where one summon is basically full combo, that's no good. But on the upside of things, being an archetype that's so heavily invested in the evenly matched phase makes deck building at least slightly easier, as you can just go second and stack the deck up with blowout cards and call it a day. But going first, that's a whole different beast we'll get into later on in the video. And so, with all of that finally out of the way, let's start by looking at the sub-archetype that works in tandem with the Glads, the test animals. Comprised of only 3 cards, and with 2 of them popping up later on in this video, it's better if we get them out of the way now. The first animal to step into the Colosseum is Test Ape, a level 2 Earth Beast with 700 attack and 300 defense, and its effect reads, when this card is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, you can special summon one level 4 or lower Gladiator Beast monster from your deck. Now, given that this card was printed in the ancient times of 2007, its effect was more in line with that time period, as battle destruction was a more common instance. But it's not 2007 anymore, and in the current year of Yu-Gi-Oh, decks like these are more common. Special Summon Unicorn, Engraver effect, you're trash. Response? Removal and negation is at an all-time high. The ape is most likely going to be destroyed by card effect, spun, banished, negated, bounced, absorbed, or being hit by all of that at once, as opposed to being destroyed by battle. But let's ignore all that and say that they do attack and destroy the ape, or you just crash the poor bastard into one of the many big bodies they'll have on their field and they either don't negate it out of pity, or just forget to because they were too busy laughing at you and got called for slow play. It doesn't amount to much, as it's not a Gladiator Beast monster effect. So while it does set up a Gladiator Beast on the field, it doesn't allow the Glad Summon to activate their effect, leaving what is essentially a vanilla monster exposed to the elements with no payoff. It wasn't played then, and it definitely shouldn't be played now. Banished face down. If it counts for anything, it's at least a target for Rescue Cat. Or maybe I'm not thinking hard enough. The next beast in line to step into the ring is Test Tiger, a level 3 Earth Beast with 600 attack and 300 defense, and its effect reads, if you control a face-up Gladiator Beast monster, you can special summon this card from your hand. You contribute this card to target one face-up Gladiator Beast monster you control, shuffle that target into the deck, then special summon one Gladiator Beast monster from the deck and treat it as if it were special summoned by the effect of a Gladiator Beast monster. Really quick tangent, I love how well they're able to tie in its effect with the theme of the deck, as the tiger is sent to battle the Glad in question, like the gladiators of old, where the tiger is defeated and allows the Glad to return to the deck because it was attacked. I just thought that was pretty cool. Anyways, the utility this card presented was actually pretty good, and only gotten better with the release of Gladiator Beast Darius and Equesti. Not only did it allow for you to access their toolbox to find a specific Glad on the fly without the need of the battle phase, you could also special summon the same monster you sent back. And with 2 other tigers in hand, it allowed you to use that Glad's effect twice or even 3 times, as most Glads lacked hard once per turns, and Test Tiger was no different. But the best part about Test Tiger's special summon effect was that there didn't have to be an original name Glad on the field. Name changer cards were able to take advantage of Tiger's effect, as the monster only needed the name of a Glad, which led to Elemental Hero Prisma being an honorary Gladiator Beast. More on that later. And furthermore, with the introduction of links, it also allowed for an extra body on the field for a link summon if needed. But nowadays, it's not exactly necessary to run, but having it in your deck, whether you're playing the pure or tri-brigade variants, really doesn't hurt them in any way. I'm sure you'll find it come in handy more ways than you think. And just like how it was originally used, it's also a target for Rescue Cat. To the side deck you go. And now, releasing the new cat, or should I say panther, into the Colosseum is Test Panther, an Earth Beast Link 2. Just one number too high there, buddy. With the Link material being 2 monsters, including a Gladiator Beast monster, and having downward left and downward pointing arrows with 800 attack, and its effect reads, if this card is Link summoned, you can add 1 Gladiator Beast card from your deck to your hand. You can target 1 Gladiator Beast monster you control, shuffle that Gladiator Beast monster into the deck, and if you do, special summon 1 Gladiator Beast monster with a different original name from your deck. This is treated as a special summon by the effect of a Gladiator Beast monster. You can only use each effect of Test Panther once per turn. A part of the new wave of support for the archetype, it sure was a welcomed and a necessary one. Like most support, it was one that was aiming to fix some of the flaws within the archetype, and in this case, that's searching. As aside from the sparse few cards that do, one of them being the only good one, the archetype severely lacked a way to search out its cards. And with the direction Yu-Gi-Oh! Has taken, where searching is very important to any strategy, Test Panther being able to search any card with Gladiator Beast in its name on Link Summon is
beautiful.
And that it also retained Test Tiger's effect, albeit a tad toned down, with you needing to summon a different Glad than the one you sent back, and it's once per turn. All on a Link 2 makes this card integral to the Gladiator Beast playstyle from now and into the foreseeable future. And in the Tri-Brigade variant, you have easier access to it thanks to its beast typing. Although you don't get the search if you use the effects of the Tri-Brigades to Link Summon it. There's not one bad thing I can really say about this card, except this goes straight to the extra deck. Now putting the beasts back in their cages, let's get the true fighters of the bloody sport into the Colosseum, the Gladiator Beast. Starting off the extensive list of fighters will be the level 3s of the archetype, the first being Gladiator Beast Sam Knight, an Earth Beast with 1600 attack and 1200 defense whose effect reads, when this card destroys an opponent's monster by battle and sends it to the graveyard, you can add 1 Gladiator Beast card from your deck to your hand. Wait, no search on summon? During its initial release in the year 2009, and looking through that lens real quick, being able to proc its effect was more of a possibility thanks to the slower pace of the game, allowing you to set this up in the first place and monsters being summoned and staying on the field with less than 1600 attack and or defense that you can run into was more commonplace. This doesn't count. But realistically, outside of grabbing the other monsters, which Gladiator Proving Ground did already, which has always been at 3, you were probably only grabbing one of the 2 viable back row available to them at the time. Hell, the text could have read, you can add 1 Gladiator Beast War Chariot to your hand and nothing would have changed. But fast forward to now, and thanks to the most recent support for the archetype, it definitely expanded the pool of desired cards to search for. If only by 1, but with Test Panther's release, it made Sam Knight's effect more irrelevant than it already was. And more importantly, this is modern Yu-Gi-Oh! We're talking about, where the most common attack values on monsters you most likely see on your opponent's board ranges from 2500 to 3000, and board states like this exist made off of 5 bricks and 3 misplays, the chances of its effect going off are
zero, nada.
But funny enough, thanks to its level and typing, it's actually a viable target for Rescue Cat. That cat really put in work for this deck. Being able to summon 2 Sam Knights to either go into Test Panther or their other archetype Link monster, Gladiator Beast Dragasis, and a plethora of other combo lines that involve Sam Knight, gives them enough viability to keep him pretty relevant. As Link and graveyard fodder, but relevant nonetheless, depending on the variation of Glad you're playing. If anything, it deserves a spot in the graveyard. Alright, that's not exactly a strong start for the main deck monsters, but it's a start nonetheless. The next monster in the lineup is Gladiator Beast Thorax, a water fish, okay, with 1400 attack and 400 defense, and its effect reads, at the end of any battle phase that this card attacked or was attacked, you can return it to the deck to draw 1 card. Well, this start is definitely not getting any better. There's one really small problem with this card. Reading the text word for word, you'll notice a nice chunk of text is missing at the end of it, and that is, it isn't able to summon another Gladiator Beast monster when it tags out. How about that? While drawing a card is great, consider the following. What makes this whole thing worse is the setup to do so. Keyword setup. Not only do you have to get a successful battle phase with the previous gladiator to get his fat ass on the field, it has to survive your opponent's main phase, assuming the opponent will even waste a destruction or banish effect on him, and survive a battle with its mediocre 1400 attack, and putting it in defense isn't even an option with its abysmally low 400 defense. Now you could argue that this is modern Yu-Gi-Oh! And sometimes all it takes is one card to change the game in your favor, but are you really going to spend all those resources to lose a monster on the field and draw a card? Even doing the shortcut version of using Test Tiger to special summon it again and hoping nothing stands in its way, or something's in defense is awful because all you do is go -1 in that exchange, when you could have just played Upstart Goblin and the ass ton of other cards that could achieve the same effect with less effort if you really want draw power. But even then, the deck doesn't really care about drawing cards, as having a successful battle phase will net you a huge advantage regardless. This card is, if anything, archetypal pack filler and deserves to be banished face down. Good riddance, you scaly bastard. The next fighter to enter the ring is Gladiator Beast Retiari, a water aqua, really stretching the definition of beast here, with 1200 attack and 800 defense, whose effect reads, you can banish one card from your opponent's graveyard. With the meteoric rise of graveyard shenanigans that monsters, spells, and traps can do, despite its release in 2008, it's an effect that has withstood the test of time, and even went up in viability within the years, albeit its banishing effect being extremely slow to today's standards. Only if it was a quick play. Being able to banish any card type from the graveyard means you can hit or force the activation of some important cards. But again, it's just too slow, and spending the special summon effect of the previous Glad on him can be pretty pointless when there's plenty of cards nowadays that just do his job infinitely better, when instead you could have just spent the summon on someone who can extend your plays. If you just want another graveyard removal option, Retiari could be up for consideration, but otherwise, it's a definite banished. Ironic. Next one up is Gladiator Beast Murmelu, a water fish with 800 attack and 400 defense, whose effect reads, target one face-up monster, destroy that target. Short, sweet, and to the point. Monster destruction has always been an extremely good effect, allowing you to get over problematic boss monsters without much trouble. But in Murmelu's case, this effect is mandatory, so make sure you got a target you want to hit, or else.
I'm in danger!
Now, while this effect is and will always be relevant, in recent times, targeted destruction is a bit of a hit or miss, as some current boss monsters that you want to get rid of have protection from targeting or float into something else on destruction, where non-targeting banishment would be the preferred option. And suffering from the same problem as Retiari, should Murmelu be negated in any way, that's just a waste of a summon, considering he isn't doing anything else with his stat lines. But regardless, it's still not a bad effect to consider running if you need more ways to get rid of monsters. It gets a spot in the graveyard. And for the last in the lineup of the level 3 monsters, and one of the newer additions to the Glads, is Gladiator Beast Essedarii, a wind-wing beast with 1400 attack and 1000 defense, and its effect reads, you can discard one Gladiator Beast card, draw 2 cards. This effect isn't exactly new within the archetype, as there is another card that essentially does the same thing, the spell card Gladiator Beast Respite, which we'll get into more in depth later. But where the two differ is how they achieve the draw 2. In Essedarii's case, discarding one specified card, while a tad tedious, can be beneficial with cards like Gladiator Beast Comeback in the hand. Discarding a high level Glad that's just been cluttering your hand to the graveyard and using Comeback to easily bring them out is one of them. But where this effect provides the most benefit is in the Tri-Brigade variant, where not only are you drawing cards, but are putting more Tri-types in the graveyard for later link use. But like I said, drawing cards isn't exactly the thing Glad strive to achieve, but if that's the goal and your options to draw cards are between him and, in terms of monster effects, I'd take this guy any day of the week. He deserves a spot in the graveyard. And that about wraps up the level 3s. Now we move on to the level 4s of the archetype, and what better way to start off this section than with the only Glad to actually get limited at one point. That being Gladiator Beast Bestiari, a wind-wing beast with 1500 attack and 800 defense, whose effect reads, target one spell or trap, destroy that target. This effect is one that was extremely good for its time, as it allowed you to get over some very fierce mirror forces and other cards that would otherwise prevent your strategies and attacks to go through, and has only gotten better with age. Popping any spell or trap, regardless of position, which is a statement that will be more relevant later on in this video, is nothing to sneeze at. And moreover, it isn't once per turn. But like Murmilu, this effect is also mandatory, so better have a target unless you like popping your own back row. Earlier in the video I mentioned a combo involving Prisma and Test Tiger, and this guy was the primary target. But why? Well, to elaborate on Prisma's effect, once per turn, you can reveal one fusion monster from your extra deck, then send one of the fusion material monsters listed on that card from your deck to the graveyard. This card's name becomes the sent monster's name until the end phase. Being that Bestiari was the primary fusion material for the strongest Gladiator Beast way back when, Gladiator Beast Geysaris, being able to copy Bestiari's name directly from the deck gave you ways to summon Geysaris without the need of the battle phase. As with the Test Tiger in hand, you could just tag out the Bestiari and summon Gladiator Beast Darius to special summon the original Bestie from the graveyard. And it doesn't stop there. With the help of a Hero Lives, a card that allowed you to special summon one level 4 or lower elemental hero from your deck, at the cost of half your life points, you could special summon Prisma, use the effect, use your normal summon on a regular Glad, and go into Geysaris that way, giving way for a double summon of Geysaris if you so choose. But of course, with the passage of time, these are now old and dated strategies, much like this deck, and there are better ways to go about this nowadays. But it really goes to show that even at 1, you could do a lot with Bestiari, so having him at 3 for multiple chances to go into Geysaris was too problematic for the time. Back row destruction always gets a place in the main deck. Next up in the roster is Gladiator Beast Atorix, an Earth Beast warrior with 800 attack and 2000 defense, and her effect reads, you can send one Gladiator Beast monster from your deck or extra deck to the graveyard, except Gladiator Beast Atorix. Until the end phase, this card's level and name become the same as that monster sent to the graveyard. Well, Konami finally did it. They finally gave us an in-archetype Prisma that not only doesn't have to reveal a specific material to take the name of, but it takes the level as well. And it only took them 12 years after Gladiator's Assault to do so. The amount of utility this monster offers is pretty insane, arguably being one of the key playmakers in the current Gladiator Beast playstyle, as thanks to its level, it can be searched with Gladiator Proving Ground, providing the best target for the effect of Gladiator Beast Augustus for easy access to not only the most powerful Gladiator Beast fusion to date while setting up your graveyard. Being able to use any Gladiator Beast for this effect, you practically have access to any level for XYZ or Synchro plays if need be. But this is Gladiator Beast, and you're not doing any of that. Unless it's a good card, nothing more to it. It deserves a spot in the main deck. You know, with all this talk about name changing, I feel like I'm forgetting someone. Oh yeah, Gladiator Beast Lanista. A Windwing Beast with 1800 attack and 1200 defense, and his effect reads, target one Gladiator Beast monster in your graveyard, banish that target, and this card's name becomes that target's name until the end phase. Guess we did have an in-archetype way to change names besides Atorix. Who woulda knew? Banishing monsters is something the Glads really can't afford to do, as without some sort of outside support, like Tri-Brigade Revolt, they have no real way of interacting with the Banish Zone to bring those monsters back. And moreover, the Glad's primary boss monsters, with the exception of a few, have a specific Glad tied to them as their main fusion material. So banishing a main material piece to simply take the name of once is just downright horrible, and one of the many reasons why Prisma was played over this guy in the heyday of the Glads. Of course, nowadays, needing main material pieces for the fusions is thrown out the window with the existence of a particular boss monster we'll get into later, but that doesn't save the fact that this card has been irrelevant since the day of its release. Atorix only adding insult to injury to this bird's existence. This card gets banished face down. And now for something good. Next up is Gladiator Beast Darius, an Earth Beast warrior with 1700 attack and 300 defense, and its effect is, you can target one Gladiator Beast monster in your graveyard, special summon that target, but its effects are negated, and it is shuffled back into the deck when this card leaves the field. Coming out shortly after Gladiator's Assault, this card was essentially a godsend to the archetype as it opened up the gateways for some extremely strong plays, such as the ones mentioned in the Bestiari portion. But this effect actually has some pretty interesting interactions. One of them involved being summoned at the same time with Atorix and having a Glad in the graveyard beforehand. The way it works is Atorix's effect makes sending a Gladiator Beast from the deck to the graveyard as a cost, and as long as Darius has a legal target in the graveyard beforehand, If you make a Torix chain 1 and Darius chain 2, you are then able to summon the Glad sent for cost, allowing you to pick and choose who else you want to summon and have an extra body on the field. Another interaction, and one I'm sure a majority of people are familiar with, is with Book of Moon. After summoning the Glad from the graveyard and their effect triggering for cost, if you chain Book of Moon to that monster, its effects will no longer be negated by Darius, meaning you can extend
Even further beyond!
a main deck pick for sure. The next card in the lineup is Gladiator Beast Secutor, a wind reptile with 400 attack and 300 defense whose effect reads, special summon 2 Gladiator Beast monsters from your deck. Being able to special summon any 2 Glads, meaning you can also summon multiple copies of one with their effects intact, is actually pretty broken, as this opens up a variety of options for plays to go into. Say, if you need a back row and monster destruction, summon Bestiari and Mermelu, and going into Gyzaris after for more pops. But with an effect as crazy as this, there has to be some downsides. Because I guess Konami cared a bit about balancing back then. And aside from it needing to be summoned by another Gladiator Beast, it has extremely weak stats. The weakest stats out of all the Glads, only beating Noxious in terms of attack and Vespasius in terms of defense. Unless you're committed to using multiple resources to keep this little guy alive, there's a better option nowadays in the form of Dragasis. Still, I can safely say he gets a spot in the graveyard. For the next fighter, let's give it up for the old 1-2 punch Gladiator Beast Demakari, an Earth Beast with 1600 attack and 1200 defense whose effect reads, it can attack twice during each battle phase. Monsters with the effect to attack more than once has always been an effect unless it's tied to a big beefy boy, like Super Dreadnought Rail Cannon Juggernaut Libe, and with Demakari's 1600 attack, it definitely ain't the attack value you would want tied to this effect. Granted, if your opponent is wide open, it's a guaranteed 3200 damage. Or you can give him that Armed Samurai Benki treatment and pump him up with so much juice your opponent is OTK'd for the next 3 games. But that's not happening, and with how many big bodies Glads can put on the field nowadays, its effect has just been rendered useless. Sorry, Rocky. Time to hang it up, kid. Banished face down. The next fighter to enter the arena is one that, while he can't deliver a punch, he sure can take one. That being Gladiator Beast Hoplimus, an Earth Rock with 700 attack and 2100 defense, and its effect reads, its original defense is 2400. 2100 defense is a fairly high stat for a level 4 monster, and thinking about the state of the game back then, that was really good. And with its additional 300 boost, it could save you from an OTK, or just outright stall, if not for a turn. Unfortunately, like I said earlier in the video, the average attack value on board nowadays is just a smidge above that, and with its only ability to be nothing more than a mediocre wall to today's standards, it gets a banished face down. Next up is Gladiator Beast Laquari, a Fire Beast warrior with 1800 attack and 400 defense, and his effect reads, its original attack is 2100. It's just an inverse of Hoplimus. While his effect puts him as nothing more than a relatively high 4-star beatstick, his main purpose within the archetype was to gain access to one of the best boss monsters Glads had to offer, Gladiator Beast Heraklinos, as he was the main material needed. Unfortunately, just like I said in the Lanista segment, with the existence of the new boss monster, all he would be is an 1800 beatstick and a brick when you could have opted for other cards to further your strategy. Unless you just want another Glad to fill a monster slot, he really doesn't do anything for the deck anymore outside of that. This gets a place in the banish zone. Now, for as many 4-stars this archetype has at this point of the video, about 4 of them are relevant, or at least considerable in being ran, and this monster really doesn't change that. Gladiator Beast Tigris, an Earth Beast with 1800 attack and 800 defense whose effect reads, this card cannot be used as a fusion material monster. What the fuck? You can discard 1 Gladiator Beast card to add 1 Gladiator Beast monster from your deck to your hand. Well, what can I say really? The card speaks for itself. Oh, and would you look at that? You can't tag it out either. Wonderful. Now, all of this sounds pretty terrible, but playing devil's advocate here, there are some redeeming qualities that shouldn't be overlooked. First, it can't be used as a super poly target. And it allows graveyard setup for Lanista and Darius and gives you a search for a monster. And it's a 4-star, the perfect level to give you access to some of the archetype's powerful XYZs or synchros, which they have a grand total of 0 of. Truly peak card design. To give a fusion archetype a card that's unable to be used as a fusion material is already the most confusing shit in the world, but its effect can't even justify its inability to do so, as it's just proving ground with extra steps. And again, it can't even tag out. This is just more pack filler, trumping Thorax in that regard as top pack filler. It's not going to be banished face down, it's erased from existence. Let's forget about that travesty and move on to the next fighter, Gladiator Beast Quest. Got it right that time. A Windwing Beast with 1600 attack and 1200 defense whose effect reads, target one Gladiator Beast card in your graveyard, add that target to your hand. The recycling capability this card added to the archetype upon its release was insane. Recovering any card that had Gladiator Beast in its name made sure that Gladiator Beast monsters didn't stay in your graveyard for long, and made sure that War Chariot, a card we'll get into later, was always set. And with the release of later support in the form of Gladiator Beast Comeback, it not only allowed a quest to give the Glads an infinite monster reborn, but allowed crazy recursion to a particular boss monster in the archetype, enabling the current playstyle of the Glads today. It's an insanely good card and a centerpiece within the modern combo line. A definite fit for the main deck. And finally, for the last 4-star of the Glads, this guy became the key to all of their problems. The one card that was neglected during its release but is now the deck savior. That is Gladiator Beast Undul. A normal monster. Yep, believe it or not, this bear is actually a massive playmaker within pure variants of Gladiator Beast. With cards such as Rescue Rabbit and Unexpected Die, and the metric ton of other normal monster support, it made it easy to enable link plays for Test Panther or Dragasis, or just start your combos with Gladiator Rejection. It also proved to be a bit more resilient than the Tri-Brigade variant, as it really didn't need the graveyard to function. I say more resilient as if either version of this deck doesn't die to 1 Ash. To put it in a way, Andel is the Sam Knight in the pure version of the deck. If the Tri-Brigade variant isn't too appealing to you, Andel is the way to go. To the side deck. And that about rounds up all the level 4s. On to the level 5s. Oh. There's only 2. Alright, well, the first is Gladiator Beast Spartacus, an Earth Dinosaur with 2200 attack and 1600 defense whose effect reads, this card cannot be special summoned except by the effect of Gladiator Beast Hoplimus. When this card is special summoned, add 1 Gladiator Beast equipped spell card from your deck to your hand. Outside of the fact that there are only a handful of actually good equipped spell cards within the game of Yu-Gi-Oh!, the archetype-specific equipped spells are not that. And even if they were, this monster only being able to be summoned by another specific monster really hinders this card. If it were to see any play, and it's definitely not, it would only be because it's a main material piece for Gladiator Beast Gaio Diaz. And even then, that card is This card gets banished face down. The second 5-star on this list is Gladiator Beast Noxious, a Dark Beast warrior with 0 attack and 1000 defense whose effect reads, when an opponent's monster declares a direct attack, you can special summon this card from your hand, and if you do, change the attack target to this card, and proceed to damage calculation. This card cannot be destroyed by that battle. If this card is special summoned by the effect of a Gladiator Beast monster, you can send 1 Gladiator Beast monster from your deck to the graveyard. Being a part of the new wave of support for the archetype, it was nice to see that they kept the identity of the deck, retaining the effect of the battle phase and allowing its special summon count as being special summoned by a Gladiator Beast. Now that being said, the major downsides are that it can only be special summoned if you're about to take a direct attack, and if you're in that position in this day and age, you're probably going to lose anyways. Another downside is it can only survive that one battle, so any follow-up is guaranteed death because it ain't blocking shit after that with its pathetic 1000 defense. Why it couldn't make itself immune to battle destruction for that turn is beyond me. At least it prevents an OTK, so that's worth something. The graveyard dump is also kinda nice, as you can dump Bestiari, and if Noxious does survive, you can tag in Darius and go for Gyzaris for a retaliation play. All in all, for new support, it's definitely in the right direction, kinda, and deserves a spot in the side deck, if only for the ability to prevent an OTK and its level. With a quick sweep, we finish the level 5s and move on to the 6 stars. And there's only one. Gladiator Beast Alexander, a light beast with 2400 attack and 600 defense, and its effect reads, this card cannot be special summoned except by the effect of Gladiator Beast Demakari. If this card was special summoned, it is unaffected by the effects of spell cards. Back then, and even more now, being unaffected by spells is extremely strong with the spell-heavy direction Yu-Gi-Oh! Has taken. Dark Hole? No sir. Dark Ruler no more? Absolutely not. Change of Heart? Change your target. But just like Spartacus, it suffers from being unable to be special summoned without a specific monster. Also, it being unaffected by all spell cards means you can't use your own spell cards on it to protect it, like for example, Forbidden Lance. But it does have a pretty hefty 2400 attack, so it can at least hold its ground. Kinda. If it wasn't due to the specific monster restriction, it definitely could have seen some play today in my opinion, but unfortunately, it's a none of. Banished face down. On to the 7 stars, and starting off this list is Bestiari's older brother, Gladiator Beast Octavius, a light winged beast with 2500 attack and 1200 defense whose effect reads, target one face down spell or trap card, destroy that target. At the end of your battle phase, if this card attacked or was attacked, shuffle this card into the deck or discard one card. I feel like there was a mix-up with the back row destruction effects. This reads as nothing more than a worse Bestiari. Target your back row? Chain goes in match? Dang. Now I get it, back then cards like Mirror Force and other cards like that were more prominent, so they couldn't exactly respond to its destruction. But Bestiari can do that too. And better. But what really doesn't make sense is its massive drawback of either shuffling it back into the deck without summoning another Glad regardless if it battled, or discarding a card to simply keep it on the field. I guess easily special summoning a big beater with a bad effect was too much? Banished face down. The next and last monster for the level 7s is Gladiator Beast Vespasius, a water sea serpent with 2300 attack and 0 defense whose effect reads, at the start of the damage step, if your Gladiator Beast monster battles a monster, you can special summon this card from your hand. You can only use this effect of Gladiator Beast Vespasius once per turn. While you control this card, special summoned by the effect of a Gladiator Beast monster, all monsters you control gain 500 attack. Another monster from the new support, and just like Noxious, it's not a bad addition to the roster. Being able to special summon itself during the battle phase, and that summon effect counting as being special summoned by a Glad, is pretty decent, giving all your monsters, not just Glads, a 500 attack boost to maybe squeeze out just enough attack to get over some of your opponent's monsters. And funny enough, it's one of the only main deck Glads to have a once per turn restriction. But why having the restriction of needing a Glad to attack first in order to activate the effect is beyond me. I know allowing him to just drop in during the battle phase is a tad cheesy, but considering when he was released, that being 2019, I don't think that would have been much of an issue, especially looking at the current releases. Aside from his effect though, he's also a main material piece for one of the new fusion boss monsters. If you're looking to increase your firepower and summon a fairly high attack beater, Vespasius is the way to go. He gets a place in the side deck. And finally, the last in line to wrap up this list of the main monster lineup, and the only level 8, is Gladiator Beast Augustus, a dark winged beast with 2600 attack and 1000 defense whose effect reads, you can special summon one Gladiator Beast monster from your hand in defense position, shuffle that monster back into the deck at the end phase. Back when it was released in 2014, it really didn't do much for the archetype, as it was nice to summon a Glad from your hand with their effect live, turning those once bricks into playmakers, but the archetype still suffered from make Gaizaris or Heraklinos and hope nothing happens after. But fast forward to the later releases, and he now solidified himself as the definitive main combo piece for the current Gladiator Beast playstyle. And as per usual for the archetype, his effect is not once per turn. So should you have another Augustus in hand, you could summon that one off the first one's effect, and the new one summon another monster from your hand. But I would say that his place in the current playstyle is only due to the new fusion the archetype has gotten, and not the one he's tied to, which we'll get into very shortly. Otherwise, it's definitely earned its place in the main deck. And with the departure of Augustus from the Colosseum, we wrap up this showcase of the main deck Glads. Now turning our attention to the grade sheet of the main lineup, we can see that it's looking pretty alright. And while they put on a good show, or at least some of them did, this is a fusion-based archetype at the end of the day, so it should come as no surprise that where the true heart of the Gladiators lie is within their extra deck. So, without further ado, for the main event, with a blast from the starting horn, let's introduce the true stars of the arena and the ones whose battles shake the very foundation of the amphitheater. Let's give it up for the extra deck Gladiator Beasts. But before we go any further, there is one more mechanic I haven't mentioned yet that the Glads have in their arsenal that gave them an upper hand over other fusion-based archetypes. That being the ability to fuse using contact fusion. But what is contact fusing? Well, to quickly break it down, this type of fusion was one that instead of using the polymerization cards to summon a fusion monster, you would use the summoning method outlined on said monster. In the Glad's case, they were to shuffle the material needed on field back into the deck. So instead of starting this section off with a fusion monster, how about we start with the one extra deck Glad that completely ignores all that and is the only other Link monster besides Test Panther. That being Gladiator Beast Dragasis, a Wind-Winged Beast Link 2, with the Link material being 2 Gladiator Beast monsters and having a downward left and downward right pointing arrows with 2000 attack, and its effect reads, if a Gladiator Beast monster you control attacks, it cannot be destroyed by that battle. Also, your opponent cannot activate cards or effects until the end of the damage step. At the end of the battle phase, if this card battled, you can return this card to the extra deck, special summon 2 Gladiator Beast monsters with different names from your deck. You can only use this effect of Gladiator Beast Dragasis once per turn. One of the newer cards to join the ranks of the extra deck, it's one that I've always been at odds with. While this card being a Link monster and its material being any 2 Glads makes it very accessible, and having the added bonuses of preventing any battle destruction and retaliation to your attacks while also summoning 2 Glads, it being a Link monster actively works against the Glad's mechanics as a whole, forcing you to throw away 2 monsters to bring them out, when what made the Glad special was their ability to play into the grind game, as your resources, those being your monsters, never had to hit the graveyard or banish zones in order to bring out their heavy hitters, creating a constant resource loop without fear of losing them due to graveyard shenanigans, and could play under cards like Dimension Shifter. I can't really see why making him a fusion would have been a bad thing, as it would have given the Glads another generic way to get Glads off the field without having to rely on Neurokius or... Another issue I have with him is the battle destruction immunity is only granted to attacking Glads, not attacked, him included. Blanket battle immunity would have been the better choice in my opinion, and giving him a little more utility if going first instead of him just being a kamikaze machine, but I think I'm asking for too much at that point. At least it's a winged beast, which means it can be summoned through the Tri-Brigade, so can't complain there. Overall, much like the other support, it's alright, and a definite staple for the extra deck. Alright, now we can start the fusions, and the first to lead the charge is Gladiator Beast Essedarii, a level 5 Earth Beast with 2500 attack and 1400 defense, its material requiring any 2 Gladiator Beast. Thanks to its material being any 2 Glads, it allowed you to get any Glad off the field after their effects are spent, and puts a high attack monster in their place. And more importantly, thanks to its level, it can be special summoned off of Insta-Fusion, and puts a high level Glad on the field for the fusion summon of that particular boss monster I kept hinting at throughout the video, Gladiator Beast Tamer Editor. The downside is that he literally does nothing else thanks to his status as a normal monster, making him just a funny monkey in a chariot. If you have room in your extra deck, he could have a home there thanks to the above mentioned, but with how tight the extra deck is nowadays, I can't give him anything more than a spot in the graveyard. The next fusion up is the MVP himself, the one who put the Gladiator Beast on its back and on the map, Gladiator Beast Gyzaris. A level 6 Dark Winged Beast with 2400 attack and 1500 defense, its material requiring Gladiator Beast Bestiari and any 1 Gladiator Beast monster, and its effect reads, when this card is special summoned, you can target up to 2 cards on the field, destroy those targets. At the end of the battle phase, if this card battled, you can shuffle it into the extra deck, special summon 2 Gladiator Beast monsters from your deck, except Gladiator Beast Bestiari. This card was absolutely insane during its era. Being able to pop any 2 cards on the field was huge, with not a lot of things having protection from destruction effects back then, as they do now, on a relatively easy boss monster to go into no less. And on top of that, it only needed to be special summoned, not just fusion summoned, for its effect to go through. And with it lacking a hard once per turn, as long as you properly fusion summoned it the first time, special summoning it from anywhere like the graveyard with Monster Reborn allowed for 2 more pops. Or you could just summon another copy of it from the extra deck. Of course, like I said with Mermelu, the more problematic boss monsters you want to deal with nowadays will most likely have some form of protection or floating effect. But that doesn't devalue Gyzaris from being able to rip apart your opponent's field of needed spells and traps. An extremely good card whose place in the extra deck will never change. The next in the lineup is Gladiator Beast Gallo Diaz, a level 7 Dark Dinosaur with 2600 attack and 1500 defense. Its material requiring Gladiator Beast Spartacus and any one Gladiator Beast monster, and its effect reads: if this card destroys an opponent's monster by battle and sends it to the graveyard, inflict damage to your opponent equal to the defense of the destroyed monster. At the end of the battle phase, if this card battled, you can return it to the extra deck, special summon 2 Gladiator Beast monsters from the deck. I bet even those who play Gladiator Beast forgot this guy existed, huh? Its effect isn't exactly bad. Burning your opponent for a monster's defense value is still damage done. But if you want to burn your opponent for anything meaningful, the attack value is where it's at. Unless you run into Labyrinth Wall in attack position, you aren't gaining much from this card. But with its 2600 attack value, it'll definitely get over something. What really holds this card back though is the simple fact its main material piece is Spartacus, a brick in a deck of bricks. But just like I said in the Lanista portion, that's not the case anymore and can be easily cheated out through the effect of Tamer Editor and possibly win you a game in the end with its burn damage. But so can the others with just simply playing the deck. It gets a place in the banish zone. Next up is Gladiator Beast Neurochius, a level 8 Darkwing Beast with 2800 attack and 1900 defense. Its material requiring any 3 Gladiator Beast, and its effect reads: cannot be destroyed by battle. If this card battles, your opponent cannot activate cards or effects until the end of the damage step. At the end of the battle phase, if this card battled, you can return it to the extra deck, special summon 2 Gladiator Beast monsters from your deck. Having battle destruction immunity and with no cards able to be activated until the end of the damage step allows you to bypass a lot of effects that would otherwise deny you that attack, assuring this card is able to proc its tag out effect. Sound familiar? Yep, this guy unfortunately got power crept by our little link friend over there, but in his case he actually has the blanket battle immunity for himself, and thanks to him needing any 3 Glads, it doesn't exactly render this card completely useless as you can return more Glads en masse should the situation call for it. Running this card won't put you at a detriment in a pure build, but with how tight the extra deck is nowadays, he gets a place in the graveyard. The next fusion in line is an OG among the ranks of the Glads, Gladiator Beast Heraklinos, a level 8 Fire Beast Warrior with 3000 attack and 2800 defense. Its material requiring Gladiator Beast Lakari and any 2 Gladiator Beast, and its effect reads: when a spell or trap is activated, quick effect, you can discard 1 card, negate the activation, and if you do, destroy it. This card must be face up on the field to activate and to resolve this effect. This card is definitely a product of its time as its effect lacks any hard once per turn or once per chain clause, meaning as long as you have cards in your hand and it's face up at the resolution, you can chain to multiple activations for multiple negations, excluding counter traps. And again, with the spell heavy environment we find ourselves in, negating multiple much needed searchers and extenders could be game ending, and if played in the Tri-Brigade variant, with a Nerve All in hand, that's an additional negation, where in that playstyle you'll typically have 2 to 3 cards in hand by the end of your combo, if nothing's interrupted, equaling up to 3 to 4 negations. It's unable to send itself back to the deck, but when you have an effect this powerful, why would you want it anywhere else but the field? Like Izaris, it'll always have a place in the extra deck. Next up is one that was added in 2019 and is arguably one of the most powerful boss monsters this archetype has to offer, Gladiator Beast Tamer Editor. A level 8 Dark Beast Warrior with 2400 attack and 3000 defense, its material requiring any 2 level 5 or higher Gladiator Beast monsters, and its effect reads: cannot be used as fusion material. There it is again. Once per turn, you can special summon 1 Gladiator Beast fusion monster from your extra deck, ignoring its summoning condition. At the end of the battle phase, if a Gladiator Beast monsters you control battled, you can shuffle one of those monsters into the deck or extra deck, special summon 1 Gladiator Beast monster from your deck. This is just an in-archetype Cyberstein. To summon any 1 Gladiator Beast fusion monster without any cost, and its only restriction is a once per turn, is absolutely bonkers. And the best part about that restriction? It's a sub once per turn. Summon another copy or reborning it, you're just continuously pumping out big bodies onto the field. Not only that, it also gave Glads that previously didn't have the effect to tag out, or tag out into another after sending itself back, that ability, making cards like Endel a true Gladiator Beast. Although that's still not enough for those other cards to be ran. Trust me. And unlike Tigris, this is an effect that can justify its inability to be used as fusion material, since one loop I can think of off the top of my head it could abuse is summoning Izaris, blowing up some cards and fusing both it and editor out for a new one since the material is generic until their whole field is gone. Run 1, 2, or 3, whatever, this is the best card in the entire archetype, no question about it. To the extra deck you go. On to the next, and that being Gladiator Beast and Nevada. A level 8 Dark Beast warrior with 1000 attack and 2800 defense, its material, requiring Gladiator Beast Augustus and any 2 Gladiator Beast, and its effect reads, must first be special summoned from your extra deck by shuffling the above cards you control into the deck. If summoned this way, you can special summon one level 7 or lower Gladiator Beast fusion monster from your extra deck, ignoring its summoning conditions. At the end of the battle phase, if this card battled, you can return this card to the extra deck, special summon 2 Gladiator Beast monsters from the deck. Well, that just sounds like a worse Tamer Editor. And you're absolutely right. I even put Tamer Editor above this one just to highlight how garbage it is. What's confusing about this card is it was released alongside Tamer Editor doing a better job with little to no restrictions. It even has an easier summoning condition to boot. And focusing on the text, if summoned this way, if you cheat this out of the deck, you don't get its effect. But even if you did, the pool of monsters it could summon is extremely small. Unless you're really keen on summoning either the dinosaur or the monkey, the card might as well have said, you can special summon Gyzaris, and it literally wouldn't have changed anything. But it's not all downsides here, as it does give fusion deployment a target to get Augustus on the field, and getting 2 more materials to fuse with isn't exactly the hardest thing in the world to do, and if you do, you could summon Gyzaris, pop 2, fuse into Tamer Editor, and re-summon Gyzaris for an additional pop 2. Or if Andibata allowed it, summon him off a pre-established editor, summon Gyzaris, pop 2, and XYZ summon into one of the many powerful rank 8s Yu-Gi-Oh! Has to offer. But the payoff for either play, in my opinion, isn't exactly worth it, as the end board that Glads could establish is far better with editor alone. It's unfortunate because he's not a bad card in retrospect, just more overshadowed. And the best way I feel to use him is be a target for fusion deployment, so if you're running that card, there you go. Otherwise, it gets a place in the banish zone. And to wrap up the fusion monsters is the only level 10 and the most recent to be added to the roster, Gladiator Beast Domentianus. A Dark Sea Serpent with 3500 attack and 1200 defense, its material requiring Gladiator Beast Vespasius and any 2 Gladiator Beast monsters, and its effect reads, once per turn when your opponent activates a monster effect, quick effect, you can negate the activation, and if you do, destroy it. You choose the attack targets for your opponent's attacks. At the end of the battle phase, if this card battled, you can return this card to the extra deck, special summon 1 Gladiator Beast monster from your deck. Having a monster effect negation and destruction in monster form added to the roster is nice, making it a war chariot on legs, but what really gives this card a pretty insane edge is its ability to choose the attack targets for your opponent, forcing those monsters to run into them, and with a massive 3500 body, it can take on a majority of monsters in the modern metagame. And moreover, since its attack redirection is treated as a continuous effect and not an activated one, it can't be negated. Also, it's not once per turn. This also allows you to protect your weaker monsters on the field without having to worry about them being destroyed by battle, like Appaloosa, giving you free reign to use up her negations without turning her into your opponent's win condition. And for a short time, there was a pretty degenerate strategy involving Seymour and Wind Barrier statue when used in the Tri-Brigade variant. Not that Wind Barrier wasn't already an oppressive card to begin with, but being even unable to attack into it just made for a pretty unbreakable board without the assistance of Dark Ruler No More or other blowout cards that can't be responded to. Now, the only problem I have with this card is returning this card to the extra deck to only special summon 1 Glad is pretty odd, considering the investment you have to put into it to even get him on the field. But of course, you're rarely, if at all, summoning him properly anyways, using Tamer Editor 99.9% of the time. A must-have in the extra deck. And with every single Gladiator Beast monster accounted for, we close off the arena of the Colosseum. Turning our attention again to the grade sheet for the extra deck, we can see that it's looking pretty strong. But despite all the strength and ferocity that the Glads fight with within the arena, there was an element to the vicious combat that had a heavy hand in deciding the outcome of the battle. That factor belonging to the weapons they chose, or in Yu-Gi-Oh terms, the spells and traps they armed themselves with. So let's take a trip into the armory of the Gladiator Beasts and see how sharp the edges of their blades are. Starting out with the spells, the first up is where all the fighting takes place, the field spell, Colosseum Cage of the Gladiator Beast, and its effect reads, place 1 counter on this card each time a monster is special summoned from either player's deck. All Gladiator Beast monsters gain 100 attack and defense for each of those counters on this card. If this card would be destroyed by a card effect, you can discard one Colosseum, Cage of the Gladiator Beast, to prevent this card from being destroyed. With a protection effect like that, I can definitely see why this place is falling apart. The protection effect this card provides is probably one of the worst I've ever heard of. Why it requires you to run 3 of what is essentially a glorified attack stat booster when it doesn't even give you any advantage until you build at least 5 to 10 stacks is something I'll never understand. I get different plays different time, but even by standards back then, this was awful. And looking at today, forget about it. I'm gonna take a wild guess about the thought process behind this decision and say this was the workaround so that you're not forced to using your counters, losing some of that whopping stackable 100 attack and defense. It's just a garbage card with no redeeming qualities. Banished face down. The next card up is the normal spell card, Gladiator Proving Ground, and its effect reads, add 1 level 4 or lower Gladiator Beast monster from your deck to your hand. With the search heavy landscape we find ourselves in this day and age, having an in-archetype Rhoda that's not limited or once per turn at your disposal is definitely a luxury that shouldn't be understated. It effectively made sure that some of the more important glads like Bestiarii or Atorix were always in hand when needed, and thanks to Augustus, allowed for play extension into either Geysaris or Tamer Editor. Unfortunately, thanks to the situation the glads find themselves in the modern metagame, outside of pure decks, there is a better option with Fire Formation Tenki. I'm probably going to be crucified for that one. But despite that, it's just a really good card overall. To the side deck. The next card is the quick play spell card, Gladiator Taming, and the effect reads, if a face-up Gladiator Beast monster is on the field, activate one of these effects. The first, select one face-up monster your opponent controls and change its battle position. The second, select one Gladiator Beast monster your opponent controls, take control of it until the end phase. Between both of these effects, I want you to take a guess on which one of these is even remotely useful. Forcing a monster into defense position is sorta cool, preventing a high attack monster from running over your glads and giving you something to hit on your turn should all their monsters be stronger than yours, but the control effect is okay? It definitely goes wild in the mirror match, but the odds of running into a Gladiator Beast player in the modern day is about 0%. You could find some use for it in Edison or something. Otherwise, it's a strong banished face down. Next in line is the normal spell card, Gladiator Beast Respite, and its effect reads, shuffle 2 Gladiator Beast cards from your hand into the deck, then draw 3 cards. This should go without saying, but drawing 3 cards is an extremely strong effect, and while not the main reason, but a good reason, why Graceful Charity, a card that also allows you to draw 3 is banned. But unlike Charity, where there was potential for abuse with its discard 2, Respite requires 2 Glad cards to go back into the deck, and that's more of a positive than a negative, since it allows you to put back cards you would rather keep in your deck. Also, since the text doesn't say, except Gladiator Beast Respite, you can run multiple copies of it without fear of being stuck with multiple of them in your hand. But as I said with Torax, drawing really isn't the goal, and with how the Glads operate nowadays, even in pure variants, this card gets a place in the banish zone. Which is crazy because it literally says draw 3 and even that's debatable. Absolutely wild. The next card is the equipped spell card, Gladiator Beast Battle Gladius, and its effect reads, equipped only to a Gladiator Beast monster. It gains 300 attack. When the equipped monster is returned from your side of the field to the deck, and this card is sent to the graveyard, return this card to the hand. Wow. The next card on this list is Gladiator Beast Battle Halberd, an equipped spell, and its effect reads, equipped only to a Gladiator Beast monster. When it attacks, destroy 1 spell or trap card at the end of the damage step. When the equipped monster is returned from your side of the field to the deck, and this card is sent to the graveyard, return this card to your hand. This unfortunately is the best the equipped spell cards have to offer. Getting to destroy back row after an attack is pretty huge, especially with the amount of floodgates, continuous back row, and field spells that are being played nowadays. Pairing this up with monsters like Jagasis, since they only have to survive the battle, will assure their destruction. But do keep in mind, the back row destruction is mandatory. So in worst case scenario, with nothing on your opponent's field, you're gonna have to end up popping this card instead. Even with this fairly strong effect, at the end of the day, it's still just an equipped spell. And with how much removal there is, I don't think running something that's going to be a brick a majority of the time is worth it. Just run any other back row hate card. Banished face down. The next armament on our list is the equipped spell, Gladiator Beast Battle Archfiend Shield. Its effect reads, equipped only to a Gladiator Beast monster. If the equipped monster would be destroyed, destroy this card instead. When this card is sent to your graveyard because the equipped monster you controlled was shuffled into your deck, return this card to your hand. Maybe if this was a quick play, I could probably see this being played so you can bait out destruction effects, but it's an equipped spell. I don't think I need to say anymore. Banished face down. The next card and the last of the equipped spells is Gladiator Beast Battle Manica, and its effect reads, equipped only to a Gladiator Beast monster. It cannot be destroyed by battle. Damage calculation is applied normally. When the equipped monster is returned from your side of the field to the deck, and this card is sent to the graveyard, return this card to the hand. Banished face down. The next card up is the quick play spell card, Gladiator Beast United, and the effect reads, during the battle phase, shuffle into the deck from the hand, field, or graveyard the fusion materials listed on a Gladiator Beast fusion monster. Then special summon that fusion monster from your extra deck, ignoring its summoning conditions. You can only activate one Gladiator Beast United per turn. You cannot declare attacks the turn you activate this card, except with Gladiator Beast monsters. Hailing from the Legacy support, it's a card that tries to give the Glads another avenue to fuse, since looking at the evolution of the fusion mechanic as a whole, the variety of methods that exist now is pretty staggering, with archetypes like ninjas using Tobari's effect to fuse using materials from the field and hand, Telemans Merely being discarded by card effect to fuse from the field, hand, or graveyard, and now Yubel just fusing whenever, wherever. The Glads by comparison, while very powerful back then, just feels extremely slow today, with the deck's decayed playstyle mainly attributing to that. United does do a decent job of alleviating some of the trouble in this area, as you can be a tad more risky with your plays in the main phase, and if it all fails due to the many interruptions you're gonna face, just move to the battle phase and hope nothing happens there. Also, thanks to it being a quick play, should you have the unfortunate luck of going first, you can set this, and when your opponent enters the battle phase, you can drop a nasty bombing run in the form of Gyzaris. But for the most part, this is a primarily going second card, so what better place to put it in than the side deck. Next up is Gladiator's Return, a normal spell card that reads, target 3 Gladiator Beast cards in your graveyard, shuffle all 3 targets back into the deck, then draw 1 card. You know, for a card printed in 2007, it's actually not half bad. Offering sizable recovery for monster spells and traps, and drawing a card on top of that is just icing on the cake. It's just a shame it's named the way it is, and there's a multitude of cards that can stop it. Because it's named Gladiator's Return and not Gladiator Beast Return, it can't be searched, as all searches require the full Gladiator Beast to be in the name. Also, because you draw a card, it can be ashed. Because you're moving cards from the graveyard to the deck, it can be ghost spelled. And because you have to shuffle all 3 targets back, any form of graveyard disruption, like DD Crow, just outright stops the effect from resolving. It's unfortunate too, because this card's viability is more so a victim of time and power creep, but it gets banished face down. The next card on the list is the quick play spell card, Indomitable Gladiator Beast, and the effect reads, target face-up Gladiator Beast monster you control gains 500 attack until the end phase. While this card is in your graveyard, you can return 2 Gladiator Beast cards from your graveyard to the deck to return this card to your hand. While this card is just another recovery option within the Gladiator's arsenal with a decent attack boost, there's 2 distinct differences that make it objectively better than Gladiator's Return. The first being it's searchable, and the second, it has built-in recursion. Because both effects are not once per turn, with enough Gladiator Beast cards in the graveyard, you can loop these effects to recycle a majority of your Gladiator Beast cards and have a pretty beefy Glad on the field. Obviously this card won't see any play outside of pure builds, and even then it's a questionable choice, but I definitely could see it as a wacky tech option. To the graveyard you go. The next spell card is the continuous spell Gladiator Rejection, and the effect reads, your opponent cannot target Gladiator Beast monsters you control with card effects, except during the battle phase. If a Gladiator Beast monster is special summoned from your main deck, except during the damage step, you can special summon 1 Gladiator Beast monster from your deck with a different type from the monsters you control in defense position. You can only use this effect of Gladiator Rejection once per turn. We were 5 letters away from this being perfect. Having blanket protection against targeting effects is something the Glads desperately needed, and what made going first a pretty feasible option, since the only cards you would have to worry about at that point would be Nibiru and Ash. Not that they aren't threatening as it is. And having the added ability to summon another Gladiator Beast after tagging in gets you faster access to the fusions. Now for the so close to perfection part. Just like Gladiator's Return, it's missing the word Beast in between to be searchable. Also, the Glad summoned off of rejection doesn't count as being summoned by a Gladiator Beast, with the added caveat of you needing to summon another Glad different from the monster types you control. This includes non-Glads as well. Which kinda sucks, because the plays that would be possible. Man. Still, despite the flaws, the protection from targeting effects and additional summon is enough to give this card a place in the main deck. And for the last card to wrap up the spell cards is Gladiator Beast Comeback. A normal spell card with the effect, special summon one Gladiator Beast monster from your hand or graveyard with a different type from the monsters you control. It cannot be destroyed by battle. Out of all the support the Gladiator Beast have received throughout the years, this is hands down the best they've received. Thanks to it having the all-important, it's searchable, can be easily recovered from the graveyard, and it's not once per turn. Also, with the added battle destruction immunity, if all else fails, and it will, you can just special summon a Glad and, fingers crossed, get an attack off to maybe get you out of a pinch. I am a tad miffed on the different types aspect though, as again, just like rejection, this extends to all monsters you control, and the primary Gladiator Beast you'll want to run do share the same type, such as Augustus and Equest, or Editor and Heraklinos. Overall, it's an extremely good card, and thanks to its release, with the help of Tamer Editor, it facilitates the combo lines that the Glads utilize today and why they can even be played at a casual level. It gets a place in the main deck. And now we near the end of this archetype's massive library of cards. The group to wrap this up is the trap cards. To start this list off is the normal trap card, Defensive Tactics, and its effect reads, activate only if you control a Gladiator Beast monster. Monsters you control cannot be destroyed by battle this turn, and any battle damage you take is reduced to 0. Put this card on the bottom of your deck. When I was putting this video together, I had a feeling that I was missing some cards, and this was one of them. Giving the Glads a way to prevent battle destruction was something to be expected for the archetype, and this card probably could have been ran in the early days, but then you see it has a restriction for activation, and realization hits you like a truck. Wabakoo exists. The ability to put it back into your deck could have possibly salvaged its viability, but getting hit by that Demakari double of realization, with an empty board, it's a dead draw, while Wabakoo works regardless. Just play Wabakoo. You're gonna have to hard draw both anyways. Banished face down. For the next two cards, I wanted to pair them together since they're just two sides of the same coin, those being the counter traps, Parry and Disarm. Both cards require you to put a Gladiator Beast monster back into the deck for Parry to negate a trap card and Disarm to negate a spell card. Just like Defensive Tactics, thanks to the naming convention here, I almost missed these cards as well. Both these cards being counter traps is actually incredibly strong since the only thing that can respond to counter traps is another counter trap. But why split them up? Why not just make it a singular card that does both? For God's sake, Solemn Judgment existed during that time. Yeah, paying half your life points is pretty rough, but when you can negate spells, traps, and even summons, there's no real reason for you to even look at Parry and Disarm. These both get a banished face down. Up next is Trojan Gladiator Beast. A normal trap card, and its effect reads, special summon one Gladiator Beast monster from your hand to your opponent's side of the field. Then, draw one card. Well, I'll be damned. Giving my opponent a free monster for a card I can't use until my turn, unless it's a hand trap, is something I ain't too fond of. Especially with the slew of generic powerful link monsters that are running around nowadays. Hell, even in the old days, that would just equal tribute fodder or material for a synchro summon, since a majority of the time you'll most likely only have level 4s in hand. One of the best levels for everything. If you're just fiending for a draw one trap card with no downsides, Jar of Greed. You're welcome. Banished face down. Next on the list is the all-time classic, Gladiator Beast War Chariot. A counter trap card, and its effect reads, when an effect monster's effect is activated, while you control a Gladiator Beast monster, negate the activation, and if you do, destroy it. This card in the heyday of the Glads was an absolute menace. It had all the hallmarks that make a card, in this case a trap card, extremely powerful. It's searchable, can be recovered from the graveyard with a multitude of cards within the archetype, allowing you to drop the card down to 2 or 1 to make room for other cards if needed, and it's a counter trap, preventing almost all follow-up from taking place. The only negative here I can say is needing a Glad on the field, but if that's the only downside, that's okay with me. To the main deck. The next card up is Gladiator Lash, a normal trap card with the effect, activate only when you special summon a Gladiator Beast monster. Your opponent discards 1 card of their choice. Forcing your opponent to discard a card is undoubtedly an extremely good effect. Maybe catching an important combo piece, forcing them to stop their combo early, or catching a starter that would have gotten them out of a bad hand. Though the problem here is, it's one of their choice. With how many cards that have graveyard effects nowadays, and their effects activating with little to no restrictions on how they got there, more often than not, this is more of a benefit than it is a detriment. Moreover, having the stipulation of needing to special summon a Glad first makes this card's payoff completely irrelevant, as realistically it'll only take place by the end of your opponent's battle phase, or your next turn, and by then, your opponent might have used or set the majority of their important cards in their hand. Maybe in older formats, with our new knowledge and perspectives we have of the game, it could have seen play since people are more hesitant to full set their back row with threats like Heavy Storm and whatnot, but that's wishful thinking. All thanks to that their choice. Banished face down. The next card up is the normal trap card, Double Tag Team, and its effect reads, activate only when you special summon a Gladiator Beast monster. Special summon 1 level 4 or lower Gladiator Beast monster from your hand or deck. This card having the same activation requirement as Lash is less egregious here, since it's nothing but a plus at the end of your opponent's battle phase, summoning another monster that can be used as fusion material, and if your monsters survive until your turn, make a retaliation play. Or you can expedite the process and just play United. Banished face down. The next card up is Gladiator Beast Charge, a normal trap card with the effect, target face-up cards on the field equal to the number of Gladiator Beast monsters you control with different names, destroy them. Another card hailing from the Legacy support, it's not a bad form of disruption. In the best case scenario, you have the opportunity to destroy 3 cards on the field, as the typical Glad end board will consist of 3 differently named Glads, strengthening it by providing monster removal should they burn through all your negates, and just summon spam to reach powerful link monsters like SP Little Knight or Underworld Goddess. Of course, this is the best case scenario. In the worst case, you get to destroy at least 1 card, so you better time it right. For Legacy support, it's not a bad card, and it does help with going first, providing a form of disruption in the main phase or a form of protection in the battle phase. Being recyclable helps as well. This card gets a place in the graveyard. And the last card to wrap up the traps and other cards in the archetype is Gladiator Naumachia, a continuous trap card with the effect, while you control a Gladiator Beast monster, all monsters your opponent controls must attack if able. Once per turn, you can shuffle 1 Gladiator Beast monster from your hand or graveyard into the main deck, then target 1 Gladiator Beast monster you control. It gains attack equal to its original defense until the end of this turn, even if this card leaves the field. If this card in the spell and trap zone is destroyed by card effect, you can activate this effect. This turn, Gladiator Beast monsters you control cannot be destroyed by battle. For a card that says so much, it does so little. While forcing your opponent to attack could be a good thing, as this card in tandem with Dementianus could prove to be a devastating combo, it only really works if you even get to that board state in the first place. And let me remind you that one of these bad boys are enough to stop this deck in its tracks. So with this card up, without a Dementianus in sight, and this guy as your only line of defense, instead of the opponent debating if they should beat your ass, they have no choice but to. As for the once per turn shuffling, it's not too shabby as it offers recovery, and does give a targeted Glad an attack boost, but keep this in mind, the boost comes from the targeted Glad's defense, not the one you sent back, and you can only send back main deck Glads. Which leads to the question why? All the recovery cards that allow you to return monsters were never prejudiced against the extra deck, and I can't really see where the issue lies if you could send back extra deck monsters. If anything, it would be a massive help since returning the extra deck monsters is next to impossible with the current playstyle. So returning them through this effect so they can be resummoned through Tamer Editor would be the next best thing. And lastly, it needing to be destroyed by card effect in order to activate its battle destruction immunity is questionable at best. I guess you can force it by using Bestiari, Geysaris, or any other back row destruction effect or set it as bait, But why go through all that trouble when this guy exists? And for the cherry on top, it's not searchable. Great. This card gets a place in the banish zone. Taking one final look at the grade sheet, I decided to group the spells and traps together as it was much easier to show what could or should be played as opposed to what shouldn't. So now that we went through every individual card in that massive library with their potential uses and playability, let's see if that new support is good enough to keep these gladiators fighting in the arena. Before we do that though, let's go over the 5 new support cards real quick for a better understanding of what they're capable of. The first in the line is the new test animal, Test Bear, and it reads, if you control a Gladiator Beast monster special summoned from the deck or extra deck, you can special summon this card from your hand. You can only special summon Test Bear once per turn this way. You can tribute this card and shuffle one Gladiator Beast monster from your hand or face up on the field into the deck/extra deck, special summon up to 2 Gladiator Beast monsters from your deck. This is treated as a special summon by a Gladiator Beast monster's effect. You can only use this effect of Test Bear once per turn. The next card in the lineup is the new Link monster, Gladiator Beast Darios, and its effect reads, if this card is Link summoned, you can activate this effect. You cannot use monsters as Link material for the rest of this turn, except Gladiator Beast monsters. Also, special summon 1 level 4 or lower Gladiator Beast monster from your hand or graveyard. Or, if your opponent controls a monster, you can special summon 1 Gladiator Beast monster from your deck instead. You can only use this effect of Gladiator Beast Darios once per turn. Gladiator Beast monsters you control cannot be destroyed by battle or card effects during your opponent's battle phase. The next one up is the beefy new fusion, Gladiator Beast Claudius. His effect reads, must first be special summoned from your extra deck by shuffling the above cards from your field and or graveyard into the deck/extra deck. If summoned this way, you can conduct your battle phase twice. Once per turn, if your opponent activates a monster effect, you can activate this effect based on whose turn it is. Yours, special summon 1 Gladiator Beast monster from your deck. Your opponent's, special summon 1 level 11 or lower Gladiator Beast monster from your extra deck, ignoring its summoning conditions. The next card on our list is another main deck monster, Gladiator Beast Magister. His effect reads, you can reveal this card and one other Gladiator Beast monster in your hand, special summon both. If this card is special summoned by a Gladiator Beast monster's effect, you can add 1 Gladiator Spell or Trap from your deck to your hand. You can only use each of the preceding effects of Gladiator Beast Magister once per turn. At the end of the battle phase, if this card battled, you can shuffle it into the deck, special summon 1 Gladiator Beast monster from your deck, except Gladiator Beast Magister. And for the last of the new support, the new field spell, Flavius Arena of the Gladiator Beast, and its effect reads, you can discard 1 card, add 1 Gladiator Beast monster from your deck to your hand. When an opponent's monster declares an attack, you can special summon 1 Gladiator Beast monster from your deck, and if you do, it cannot be destroyed by battle. During the end phase, if a Gladiator Beast monsters were special summoned from your deck this turn, you can set 1 Gladiator Trap from your deck. You can only use each effect of Flavius Arena of the Gladiator Beast once per turn. Alright, so with this newly acquired information, how does the new support help the archetype to play in today's game? Throughout the video, a big thing that plagued the Glad's playability were interruptions. More specifically, the inability to play past 1 interruption, where 1 ash was the death nail in the coffin that was your play. The support definitely addressed this problem and fixed it in spades. Out of all the support here, Magister alone does a lot of the heavy lifting because it does everything that the Glads would do at the end of the battle phase, without the battle phase. And quite frankly, it's pretty bloated for a single card. It's easy to search for off of Gladiator Proving Ground, turns any Glad in your hand into an actual effect monster while triggering its own effect, doesn't waste your normal summon, and lets you search for rejection. Well, any Gladiator Spell or Trap, but if you're not searching rejection, you're already making a big mistake. And it doesn't stop there. If both effects somehow get negated, like an Impermanent Veiler, you can jump into the new link, Darios, who can extend your plays by summoning another needed Glad to the field. But if that gets negated as well, you still have your normal summon, summoning whatever monster you still might have in your hand and going to Test Panther and so forth and so forth. There's so much here that the deck can do now with just these 2 cards that it can go first without any issues and finally play through not just a single interruption, but multiple with a really big failsafe button in the form of Claudius, since his summon only requires you to shuffle 5 Glads back that are either on the field or in the graveyard into the deck, and with all that link summoning and summoning in general, it's almost guaranteed. It was quite surprising to see that the support not only modernized the gimmick that the Glads are known for, the whole tagging in and out, without compromising the identity of the deck too much, but also keeping the deck bound to its own archetype while still being strong enough to work under its own merits without the need of a secondary engine. What was also nice to see is that despite the age of some of these cards, these 5 cards made a decent amount of cards in their library actually useful, which was another problem the Glads had. Despite years of support, none of it really impacted the deck in any significant way. As a matter of fact, the support did so little where if you wanted to play Glads, Pure was out of the question, forcing you to mix it with Tri-Brigade, and for the most optimal way to play it with as little bricks as possible, this package was the best way to do so. The cards in question being 2 Augustus, 1 Atorix, 1 Quest, and 1 Comeback for the main deck, and for the extra, 1 Heraclinos, 1 Domitianus, 1 Geysaris, 1 Tamer Editor, 1 Test Panther, and 1 Dragasis. Although this was more the whole freight than a package. But now all of that is a thing of the past, and it definitely made pure builds a strong, if not the strongest, possibility, while making a lot of the cards on the grade sheet that were just side deck, graveyard, or banished fodder into main deck worthy cards. Cards like Retiari Mermilu, where instead of wasting a tag out on them at the end of the battle phase, Magister and Claudius add a lot of value to their effects. And the best part is, with Claudius' second battle phase, you can throw in Demikari. But on a serious note, it made Gladiator Beast Charge a definite piece for the main deck. With the help of Flavius, Arena of the Gladiator Beast, which I'm really glad they retrained the field spell. All the support in the world couldn't fix that old garbage. Even if your field is just filled with main deck Gladiator Beast, it turns that rather inconspicuous field into a massive board wipe. And with a good end board, you can destroy up to 6 cards total. And if you're just looking for a way to deal with a rather pesky monster like SP Little Knight, you got War Chariot as an option as well. Thank God it's a counter trap. It only took 15 years after Gladiator's Assault to get support so good that it not only shook up the Gladiator Beast playstyle, but virtually tied a majority of the cards together into a playable strategy once again. And I honestly couldn't be any happier. So in the end, with this overall assessment of the Glads, I think it's fair to say that currently, without any of the new support, they suck. And that's okay. Within the polarizing landscape that is Yu-Gi-Oh!, there's always going to be this strong divide within the community as newer sets and cards that are added to the game will more often than not add new problems to it, and will most likely introduce an archetype or splashable engine that is just a cut above the rest, with the release of the next set after it, strengthening said archetype or engine even further and just flat out shifting it to a tier 0 status. Or on the same coin, those said sets introducing cards that are must-haves for competitive play, but have a price point that just drive people away from the game entirely, forever keeping this boat rocking amongst the turbulent sea of discourse. But despite the crushing waves of bad formats and tier 0 decks, Yu-Gi-Oh! Sometimes finds itself returning to familiar shores. The shores being a recent surge of support for a variety of old archetypes that don't see play anymore due to the lack of firepower to play in the modern day, with some examples being Fables, Blue Eyes, that one's a given, Mermails, Fire Kings, Gem Knights, and the list goes on. So while your favorite pet deck may not be playable now, who knows? Maybe in the future, just like the Gladiator Beast, there might be that one wacky card or fresh line of support that gives your favorite pet deck the strength to play in the current landscape, and might even make it competitively viable, if maybe just as a rogue option. And if the new support isn't enough for the deck to reach that point, not all decks have to be. As long as we're playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And enjoying it for what it is, a wacky, convoluted mess with different ways to play, whether it be on paper, online, or a different format altogether, I think it'll be alright. Because not everything has to be competitive, it could be what card games are supposed to be. A good time with friends and those around you.